Welcome to another episode of All About Art. If you're new here, All About Art is a podcast with the mission of demystifying the professional art sector by publishing interviews with people working in the arts as they talk about their education, career paths, and more, spotlighting the cultural sector as a really great place to work. I also produce solo episodes where I talk about different topics in the art world from the point of view of someone who works in it. Right now, full-length interviews of All About Art are audio only, but depending on where you are tuning in, you can either watch the solo episodes or you can just listen in too. Before we continue, if you tune into this episode and you enjoy it, please help us out by hitting the thumbs up or rating the podcast over on the streaming site of your choice, as it helps us continue to produce the show. And now, let's dive into the episode. You've probably seen it. Those little buttons that say, support me on Patreon, buy me a coffee, subscribe for exclusive content. They're like modern tip jars for people trying to make a living from what they love, tucked under YouTube videos, Substack posts, and Instagram bios. That model is called micro-patronage. And while it feels almost casual, it's quietly transforming the creative economy. It's not glamorous, it's not a revolution, but it's a symptom of something much bigger. The old infrastructures of cultural funding from arts councils or institutional grants are no longer enough to sustain a generation of artists or arts professionals. And as online spaces become increasingly structured around professionalized content creation, the gap between making and surviving gets wider. So today, I want to unpack what's actually happening, because on the surface, micro-patronage seems simple. Small, regular contributions that add up to something sustainable, a form of crowdfunding in a way. But in practice, it's reshaping what it means to make art in public, who creatives imagine they're speaking to, and how we can think about access in a digital world. Micro-patronage shifts the question from how do we fund art to who gets to participate in its creation. And to explore all of this, I've partnered with FOLLOW.ART for this episode. I'm intentionally zooming in on their Support My Practice feature and their broader ethos, making support communal and centralized again for artists, curators, and audiences. If you want the bigger picture, I really recommend listening to the interview episode that we did with them earlier this month. Their work sits at the intersection of technology and creative sustainability, and they've become a test case for what a healthier creative network might look like. But this isn't an ad, it's an analysis of three things. Number one, why micro-patronage emerged and why it matters right now. Number two, what FOLLOW.ART is trying to build and how it differs from other platforms. And number three, what all of this means for artists, supporters, and the idea of art as something both personally and publicly funded. Micro-patronage didn't appear out of nowhere. It's a direct response to an infrastructure that has been eroding under creative workers for decades. Over the last 30 years or so, public arts funding has been cut, outsourced, or made increasingly competitive, at least in London. Physical galleries, which I love deeply, have become inadvertent gatekeepers to shrinking markets. And social media has replaced institutional scarcity with a different kind. It's an economy built on attention, where visibility is unpredictable and rarely monetizable. We're stuck in a contradiction. We've never had more art and more artists, but it's never been harder to make a living as one. So micro-patronage emerged as a survival tactic. Speaking for myself, platforms like Substack or Patreon have never been life-changingly lucrative for me, but they've given me enough of an emotional boost to keep going. For example, it's how I sell All About Art merch, we have hats, and it's also how I was able to support some independently organized events through the podcast in the past. And I'm not alone. Patreon, Ko-fi, Substack, they all let artists and other creatives bypass the traditional gatekeepers and build direct, loyal communities. Instead of one big sale or commission, creators rely on many small supporters. It's a more stable, human-scale model. But there's another reason that this model took off. It appeals to the emotions of the viewer. It turns the audience, it turns you into participants. Instead of buying a product, you are supporting a person. Instead of responding to a finished artwork, You're contributing to an ongoing practice. The shift is subtle, but it's significant. From the artwork to the artist, from the object to the process. It becomes an investment in people and in experiences. This is where things get complicated. When support becomes personal, the pressures also become personal. Creators feel expected to maintain intimacy, narrate their process in real time, and keep audiences emotionally close. The relationship becomes performative, not just the work itself, but it's the life around the work. Micro-patronage has transformed creative labor into an ongoing conversation between creator and audience, where value is tied not only to what is made, but to how it's shared. There's plenty of times that I feel stretched thin, running the Patreon, promoting it, trying to keep everything afloat, all while making this podcast purely as a labor of love. It's a strange cycle of constant self-advertising just to push back against the unbeatable passion tax. And this brings us to FOLLOW.ART, because their model tries to offer the benefits without the burnout. I want to use FOLLOW.ART Support My Practice feature as a case study. For reference, and if you're watching on YouTube, I will put a screenshot up as well. It's an aspect of their artist and curator portfolio that automatically directs people that have opened the artist's profile to donate a small amount to them. Not to buy a piece, but simply out of appreciation and support for the work the artist is doing or the thoughtful work of curators. It starts from a simple premise. Supporting artists shouldn't feel like an add-on. It should be woven in to the way that we engage with culture if we want to continue to see it thrive. Where most platforms center the transaction, FOLLOW.ART centers the person, the portfolio, the network. Their interface looks less like a payment screen and more like a curated profile. You see the artist's or curator's story, the work's, project's, background, plus a straightforward way to get in touch. The support function sits alongside the bio through the Nexus card, their core feature. It's strategic reframing. Support isn't a separate link, it's part of the artist's ecosystem. And crucially, FOLLOW.ART isn't romanticizing the, quote, struggling artist. Their brand avoids scarcity, guilt, or pity. They don't frame support as charity. Instead, it's framed as participation, as being part of a practice that you believe in. Their model also raises some important questions for me. Can this scale without becoming another attention marketplace? Can it preserve authenticity once money enters the exchange? Does micro-patronage work without physical spaces, QR codes at exhibitions, openings, studios? What about a podcast that's been a free educational resource for nearly 5 years? How does that translate to supporters? Asking for a friend. FOLLOW.ART doesn't claim to have the final answer. What they're doing is building a centralized system that reduces the fragmentation that artists deal with. Instead of juggling Patreon, Substack, Instagram, Ko-fi, newsletters, creators can centralize identity, work, and support in one place. For many artists, especially those overwhelmed by maintaining multiple micro-income platforms, that alone can be transformative. Unlike other systems, FOLLOW.ART doesn't take a cut of an artist or curator's earnings, and their platform is not algorithm-based. Their features don't get pushed up or down based on likes or posting frequency, so it's different from the social media platforms that we know today. Although Patreon is also not algorithm-based, they do take a cut of your earnings though, so it follows a similar model to other platforms. It's just a little bit different and specifically for artists and curators. Visibility happens through filters of medium, location, interests, and so on. So the discovery is intentional rather than attention-based. And in my opinion, it's closer to what a digital art world infrastructure should feel like. But the funny twist in all of this is that the main case study of this episode is not really a platform that I can use myself. That's why I'm on Patreon. I've been making this podcast for 5 years, and right now, FOLLOW.ART is built specifically for visual artists and curators, not for podcasters, writers, or the wider world of independent creators in culture. I hope we will see this shift on the platform in the future because I find it a really valuable resource with a lot of potential for the art world. But at the same time, some businesses or tools aren't for everyone. which means they're specific and tailor-made for their specific audience, which can be a positive thing as well, I guess. Becoming more paywalled with subscriber-only Instagram pages, locked content tiers, exclusive newsletters, it makes sense. Everyone is trying to monetize their output, and understandably so, because we're all trying to make a living. Even outside of the online sphere, micro-patronage has its place. I'm sure we've all seen those little donation boxes at the National Gallery or Tate Britain asking you to tap your card or to give £5 during your visit. Completely voluntarily, which is cool because the museums, for the most part, remain free in London, which is a huge benefit that the city offers that other countries definitely don't. But at the heart of it all, being a little bit vulnerable here, what does it mean to ask for support? Talking about micro-patronage is one thing. Living inside it or wanting to benefit from it because a project is suited for it is another. For me, it's always been a strange mix of gratitude and exposure. Asking for support can feel scary, even when it's rational, even when everyone else is doing it. There's a small emotional tax every time, but I've learned that asking isn't necessarily begging, it's participating in a different economy. It's an economy built on transparency and mutual respect. The first time I opened a Patreon, I saw it as a temporary bridge. Now I see it as a conversation with the people who genuinely want my work to exist. But I want to definitely be honest here and say that Patreon does not help me pay my bills at the moment. And maybe part of it is that an arts podcast is quite niche, and maybe I would need to have thousands and thousands of regular listeners for a small percentage of them to contribute on Patreon every month, because it is a commitment and I do understand that. But sometimes £3 a month from one listener means more than like a £20 lump sum, because it's about continuity, not one-off charity. It signals belief in the ongoing practice, not just one output. And let's say in a dream world, all of the listeners of the podcast signed up for the £3 a month tier on Patreon. I would be able to sustain the podcast, maybe even pay myself in the process. What a concept. And even pay an assistant for a few hours a month and keep it all running with more ease. But it's difficult to communicate this, especially when I'm juggling multiple platforms, newsletters, events, posts. Big institutions like the National Gallery or the British Museum have teams who manage everything, allowing it all to run simultaneously. Artists or independent arts professionals like curators or podcasters or writers, by contrast, are expected to manage everything themselves, often unpaid. Maybe the real story of micro-patronage isn't about money at all. I mean, not fully anyway. On a deeper level, it's about rebuilding a shared sense that culture is a common ground, something everyone should value and is responsible for sustaining, but also something that everyone can have access to, enjoy, and benefit from. Patreon, Ko-fi, FOLLOW.ART, these are tools. The deeper transformation is social. We're learning to value art relationally, not just economically. And so support becomes an act of connection, not consumption. Of course, the system isn't perfect. Not everyone can afford to give, and not every artist thrives online. But even imperfect gestures change the landscape. They shift expectations towards actual care. Art prizes, such as the Visual Art Open in the UK and the Young Painter Prize in the Baltics, alongside several exhibitions, have introduced Support My Practice, the feature that FOLLOW.ART has developed, to their finalists and participants. Over 100 artists have already used the feature, receiving contributions ranging from £10 to £80 just for the opening night. So this is where we see these concepts being put to practice, and it actually shows success. Visitors often see the polished opening night image without realizing the months of often underpaid or even unpaid work behind it. Unlike music or theater gigs, most exhibitions are free to enter, which means there's rarely a direct way for audiences to acknowledge that labor, whether it's the artists or the curators. With a simple QR code in the exhibition space, which FOLLOW.ART does, visitors can make a small contribution that recognizes the research, writing, coordination, and care that usually remain invisible. Micro-patronage is fragile, and it depends on collective goodwill in a world that monetizes attention. But it's also hopeful. It suggests that the future of art might be slow, steady, and communal, rather than viral or institutional. Maybe Follow Art and their Support My Practice feature is too hopeful. Or maybe support from a small group of people is enough. Maybe that's the new community we're building together. Even a small sum is worth a different weight in encouragement. Let's be honest. It's always easier to speak positively about a vision, especially the dream of a more supportive, fairer, creative ecosystem. But rather than to harshly judge how any of this will work in practice, I'm trying to be cautiously optimistic, especially with the examples that I just named about artists and curators bringing in a little bit of financial support for putting on exhibitions that are free to the public. And a purpose-built system for these cultural professionals coming into existence is a positive thing. Because this episode has been on the topic of micro-patronage, I find it fitting to include a call to action to you listening in. Please do consider signing up to the All About Art Patreon. There are tiers asking for just £1 a month, for example, which can really help us sustain the podcast in the long run. Thank you again to Follow Art for partnering with us on this episode. If you're an artist or a curator listening in, make sure you go and explore their model and their ethos. And please check them out to decide how you feel about their approach to reshaping support systems for artists and curators. That's it for today on All About Art. As always, thank you so much for listening.